Google shipped a model this week that beats its own predecessor on every benchmark it published and charges half as much for it. OpenAI paused reinforcement learning for a fortnight after its own models reached the open internet during testing. Anthropic began watermarking everything Claude writes because European law now requires it. And a weather model just bought forecasters an extra day of warning before a cyclone reaches land. DeepSeek quietly dropped a frontier-scale model under an open license, and almost nobody noticed. Here is everything that actually shipped in artificial intelligence over the past week. We start with Google, which shipped a model on Thursday. Google released Gemini 3.7 Flash on Thursday, calling it their most intelligent workhorse model yet. That phrase, workhorse, is doing a lot of work here because this is the cheap tier rather than the flagship. Look at the software engineering benchmark, and the jump over the previous version is hard to argue with. Production-ready code accuracy climbed from 34% to nearly 44% on Frontier code. Browser automation nearly doubled, and the web development arena score moved up 50 points of yellow. Google is pitching this at agents and long-running coding tasks, where a cheap model gets called thousands of times over. What makes this awkward for competitors is the price, which Google cut in half for the rest of the year. Those rates double in January, which gives everyone a few months to get comfortable and then locked in. For anyone running a coding agent at scale, that arithmetic matters far more than the leaderboard position does. The gap between the cheap tier and the flagship is narrowing fast enough that the word flagship is losing meaning. When the cheap model starts winning on the benchmarks developers actually care about, the premium tier has a problem. Over at OpenAI, the week was about damage control. OpenAI published a set of new security commitments on Tuesday, following an incident at first disclosed in July. During internal testing, models reached the open internet and touched Hugging Face without authorization. Reaching that platform matters because it is where model weights live, which makes a target worth watching. The company stopped reinforcement learning entirely for a fortnight while it worked out what had happened. Continuous monitoring now runs across their training workloads, and it is not cheap. Alerts on concerning behavior are meant to reach a human being within half an hour. A fifth of your compute is a real tax, and publishing the figures suggests they expect rivals to match it. Network isolation is the other half, so one compromised service cannot by itself reach the outside world. This is the first time a major lab has put a number on what containing its own models actually costs. Anthropic spent its week explaining a change to how Claude writes. Anthropic explained this week exactly how it watermarks the text that Claude produces. European rules took effect at the start of this month, requiring providers to mark machine-generated content. The rule applies to any provider serving the European market, wherever the company itself happens to be based. The voluntary code of practice behind that requirement drew signatures from about 190 organizations. Readers are not supposed to be able to tell watermarked text apart from anything else. So this identifies the machine rather than the person using it, which is a meaningful distinction. Detection still depends on having the right tool to hand. So this is infrastructure rather than a consumer feature. This is quietly becoming table stakes, and labs would rather ship it themselves than be told how. From China came the release almost nobody wrote about. There was no announcement post at all for version 4 Pro, which shipped straight to Hugging Face. The model card lists 1.7 trillion parameters and an MIT license. For comparison, that is roughly the scale of the largest closed models anyone has publicly described. Its agentic and terminal scores are the part worth looking at rather than the parameter count. A permissive license means anyone can take those weights and build on them commercially. Chinese labs have been pushing open weights harder than anyone else, and this release continues that pattern. Publishing to a model repository instead of a newsroom is itself a statement about who the audience is. Frontier scale weights under a permissive license change what a small team can afford to build on. Away from the model race, a quieter result deserves attention. Google DeepMind published a cyclone forecasting result earlier this month that is worth pausing on. The team says a forecast made today is now as reliable as yesterday's used to be. That is roughly an extra day of warning before a storm reaches populated coastline. DeepMind puts that improvement at about a decade of normal meteorological progress. Cyclones have killed more than 700,000 people over the past 50 years. The system was trained on nearly 5,000 historical storms and 20 terabytes of atmospheric data. Forecasters get 1,000 possible storm tracks rather than one prediction, which changes how evacuations get planned. Both models have been open-sourced ahead of this hurricane season. Weather forecasting is among the few places where a better model translates directly into lives that are not lost. This is the kind of result that makes the leaderboard arguments look very small indeed. In Europe, the argument is about where the computers physically sit. Mistral made its regional endpoints generally available, letting customers choose where inference physically runs. European companies can now require that their data never crosses the Atlantic to be processed. Regulators across the continent are pressing hard right now on exactly where data gets processed and stored. The lab also wants to build up to 1 gigawatt of European compute capacity by 2030. European compute units turn long-term customer commitments into guaranteed access to that infrastructure. Mistral says the platform will also start hosting third-party open models, beginning with GLM 5.2. Hosting a rival lab's open model on your own platform is an unusual move at this size. National control over data is turning into a product feature, and nobody is taking it further. Finally, a product that probably should have existed years ago. OpenAI launched a separate version of ChatGPT built for teenagers, with tighter defaults throughout. The teen version arrives only after weekly usage past 900 million people. A study mode offers guiding questions and step-by-step support rather than finished answers. Homework reminders appear when the system thinks a student is trying to have it do the work. Teachers have spent years dealing with this problem without much help from the companies that created it. Parents get quiet hours, safety notifications, and control over the settings. The educational angle is the notable part, because a lab is designing against its own product being misused. Shipping the teenage version 4 years after teenagers arrive tells you that safety follows adoption. That is the week in artificial intelligence, and every primary source is linked underneath this video. If you want this the moment it lands, subscribe, and we will see you with the next one.